Good afternoon. I hope you all had a wonderful week so far, and it's great to see many of you with us. For those of you who I have not had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Camila Gutierrez, the manager of programming for Fintech Americas, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the second episode for our exciting new program, The View from the Edge, as part of our weekly FATV channel. The View from the Edge is our groundbreaking new program where we will be diving into the truths and tenets of successful digital transformation with Chris Colbert, former Managing Director of Harvard Innovation Labs and Chairman of the Board of Fintech Americas, to help you along your transformation journey. As you may know, my job is to make sure our weekly FATV channel is constantly evolving around the biggest challenges and opportunities you have, both personally and professional. And I would love you to hear your feedback after this event as you would like to like or dislike about this new show. Just 15 minutes before after the event close, you will receive a short NPS survey to your email. It would be fantastic if you could spend just a few minutes to complete this. It would be really helpful to make sure we only bring you the best content to your screen each week. Before we get going and invite Maria and Chris to the stage, I want to remind you all Fintech America's events are based on interactivity. In fact, remind you, we love questions. If you look to the right of your screen, you will see a stage chat tab. This is where all questions will go directly to our host. Please do not be shy and ask away. We will be also adding poll questions through this show, so please make sure you vote and get involved into the conversation. Now, enough of me. I am delighted to hand the virtual stage over to our Chief Growth Officer, Maria Mancuso. Please join me in welcome Maria to the stage.
Thank you, Cami. Thank you very much. Well, welcome to our community to another episode of The View from the Edge. As Camila says, this is an interactive program, so please ask questions. I'm going to say this in Spanish. Las preguntas las pueden hacer en español y yo me encargo de traducírselas para Chris. Also, we're going to have some polls. This is important because then you can respond and your response will be completely anonymous. So please respond them so that we can have a much more rich and interactive conversation. As many of you know, Chris Colbert is the former managing director of the Harvard Innovation Lab, and he's also the chairman of the board of Fintech Americas. He's a world-renowned speaker, and he speaks all around the world about transformation. He was one of our keynotes in our last May event here in Miami. And invariably, one of the questions that he gets asked, I would say almost always after his presentation, is, Chris, would you be willing to talk to my CEO? So now the question and this episode is, Chris, why they are asking that? What is going on? And by the way, are you willing to talk to their CEOs?
Well, firstly, thank you, Maria. Thank you, Cami. Thank you, Joe, behind the scenes for putting the second episode of View from the Edge together. As Cami said, the intent of this show is to dig into the truth, like what is really going on. And that's one of my theories, is that in the business world, we tend to operate on the surface, on the veneer, because there's safety. It's a kind of a two-dimensional environment, and it's all clean and black and white. And I think the reality, the answer to a lot of the more important questions we're asking as business people and people is beneath the veneer, in the murkiness below. And that's what this show is all about, trying to get into the murkiness. And so my first I guess reaction to the question of why are these people, as Maria said, almost every time that I speak, somebody walks up to me after and says exactly what Maria said. Chris, would you be willing to talk to my CEO? And like, why? And I have theories, and Maria has theories, and I'm going to ask her the question in a little bit. But I think one answer is it's what we're talking about is really complicated. And individuals and organizations maybe aren't clear that their CEOs understand the complexity of this thing called transformation. That could be one reason. Second reason is they could just be afraid to talk to the CEO directly. You know, so Maria, she used to work at Citi, going to the CEO of Citi and saying, hey, you know, we're missing some opportunities on the transformation front, and or the organization is not operating in a innovative, transformative capacity. I have some thoughts. In a lot of organizations, and particularly, I'll just say it, banking organizations, that's not allowed. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later in terms of how to really create a transformative organization and be a transformative leader. So a fear of expression, the complexity, and I think another one would be, I kind of know what the problem is, but I don't know exactly what to do about it. And so I don't want to go to the CEO and say, hey, we have a problem or even an opportunity if I don't also have an answer to that. So over the last few years, again, this question has come to me multiple times, and it prompted me, I guess about 18 months ago, to write a series of letters called Letters to the CEO. And it's a sequence. And the first letter that I would write, if I in fact wrote a letter to a CEO, would be all about why. I think part of the transformation, the digital transformation truth, the murky truth, the unpleasant truth, is a lot of organizations don't know why. And by the way, you know, I've been running businesses my whole life and observing humans my whole life and observing business people my whole life, and I have experienced many bandwagons. Maria, what's the Spanish term for a bandwagon? You know what a bandwagon? Like people getting on a bandwagon.
Sí, like, como subirse al tren, que la gente se suban todos al mismo tren, sería.
And it's a human phenomenon where a word appears in the lexicon of business. You know, total quality was back in the 80s. Customer centricity was in the 90s. And it becomes a buzzword. And then every organization is like, we got to do some of that. Right? Like and they don't even know what it is. And so I think the first place I would start in writing a letter to a CEO, and the letter that I did write to the CEOs, is really talking about the why transformation is no longer an option. And that's the simple idea that change is a constant and it's only going to accelerate. And if we don't figure out how to evolve the proposition of the bank or the business, it's quite possible that we'll be out of business. Now, that might be 10 years from now, 20 years from now, whatever, but it's going to happen. And getting the CEO to understand that, and also helping them, I think, learn how to deal with the conflicting pressure. And what I mean by this, Fintech Americas has this. Maria, you can comment on this. We have a pressure of delivering on the product that we currently have, and doing that really well. And at the exact same time, figuring out how to evolve the whole damn thing. It's like, you know, and in the case of publicly traded companies, you have financial pressure that you have to deliver every quarter. So you've got the core business, the current P&L that you've got to deliver. And at the same time, you're supposed to reinvent the whole thing.
Yeah, conversations Chris, with a CEO, one of the things that he says that he works, and divides his day. And so some part he talks, works about the present, but sometimes he has to work on the future. And then
Right.
one of the things that we heard about in the market a lot is like, hey, let's hire a transformation officer, and we solve it.
Well, yeah, and I think that's classically human, and this is a sort of that's a perfect example of companies operating at the veneer, on the surface.
Mm-hmm.
So the surface answer to transformation is, let's hire a chief transformation officer and give that poor bastard the responsibility of figuring out how to transform our bank while we run the business over there. I mean, I saw this at Harvard running the innovation lab. People think, well, if we just create an innovation lab, it will make the rest of the organization innovative.
Yeah.
Or another scenario is we just acquire a small startup and bring them into the mothership, and that startup will magically make the mothership innovative, transform the mothership.
Mm-hmm.
And those are surface level strategies that never actually achieve much of anything. And the reason why is because the truth of transformation, and everybody that's heard me speak, and this is sort of the stump speech, the repeating phrase, this is about human transformation. But the problem with human transformation is it's murky, it's mucky, it's messy, it's complicated. It involves behavior, and they're like, I'm not going there. So let's keep it at the surface level and just hire a chief transformation officer who will in fact fail.
When they think about behavior, I think automatically also think, okay, let's involve HR. Now it's an issue for HR, and we heard a little bit of HR and the pain points that they have, because how they are gonna make the transformation themselves.
Okay, that's a great statement, and this is another kind of crazy view that I have that I think is probably true.
Okay, let's see.
Organizations, for-profit organizations, are focused on one thing: profit, growing profit, which then says that their means to achieve that is productivity, right?
Mm-hmm.
That sets up a dynamic where these organizations are structured as a collection of functional boxes. Okay, so there's a marketing box, there's an HR box, there's a commercial box, there's a retail banking box, there's a technology box, right? So to your point, CEOs like, okay, this is about behavior. I get, we've got to, in order to transform the bank, we've got to transform the way we are. That the way we are is a collection of behaviors. So I'm going to go tell the people in the HR box that they need to solve the problem. And you're like, no, this cannot be solved by box thinking. This cannot be looked at through the lens of productivity. This needs to be looked at through the lens of realizing the full potential of the organization and all the humans in it, and a recognition that it is an integrated symbiotic task, not a task that can be accomplished by delegating to a box. And it requires the leadership team, not just the CEO, but the entire C-suite, to understand what the hell I just said.
Mm-hmm.
And to own it. Because they'll be like, well, that's HR's problem. I got to go run the commercial business, or I got to go run the retail. I got to go do my thing. You're like, no, dudes, if you want to transform the entity, you're talking about transforming the people, and that includes transforming yourself, which means changing your behavior while you ask other people to change their behavior. Go ahead. And you got a question.
Well, we have Richard Martinez that I think summarizes, this is a $1 million question. How do you transition from that surface level strategy to creating the necessary reflection within the senior management to understand that transformation goes beyond hiring an innovation head? So
that is a brilliant question. Thank you, Richard. It made me feel good that somebody understood what the hell I was saying. I think it takes unique leadership to understand that the real power of an organization is in what I call that third dimension, that the surface is 2 dimensions. And the surface approach worked really well for decades. And the focus purely on profit worked really well for decades, particularly with the introduction of technology. Global productivity, corporate profit is through the roof. So you're like, what's the problem we're trying to solve here? But the problem is the world is changing. The complexities are getting greater. The interdependencies are getting more profound. People's expectations as employees are getting dimensional. This whole thing in the US, I don't know if this is happening as much in Latin America, around purpose. People are showing up in work and saying, what is the purpose of this organization? If you want me to do my job, if you want me to stay in my job, if you want me to join your organization, I need to understand that it is about more than profit. I need to understand that my role is about more than a paycheck. I want a level of connection. I want a level of meaning. I want a sense of fulfillment. I want more. And that is the third dimension. The old worker was the 2-dimensional worker of, I come to work, I sit at my desk, I do my job, it's 5 o'clock. As long as I get a paycheck. But the new worker has a whole different expectation, and the world around us, in its own way, has a whole different expectation. And the only way we can deliver in that world is to recognize that stuff underneath the veneer. Mm-hmm. How well we integrate, how well we collaborate, how well we take risk, how we redefine the measures of what constitutes performance. If profit is is no longer sufficient for the modern age, it's not enough of a measure. And I go back to what the first statement I made around this. It takes a different kind of leadership to understand or accept what I just said. So in my letters to the leader, I'm trying to convince them of what I just said. Yeah, go ahead.
No, because here we have another question, great question. Alfredo Perla. It says, digital transformation is a matter of mindset, not specifically of technology. Is innovation synonymous with a high-performance culture?
Excellent, Alfredo. Excellent question. And my blunt answer is yes. And I use this one example. And some people hate Amazon, some people love Amazon. You have to be impressed with what they've done.
Exactly.
And they built a $500 billion. Mm-hmm. In the U.S., it is our retailer. Like when you buy something, you don't even think about where you're going to buy. You just buy it on Amazon. But more interestingly, Amazon from the start had a culture and a motivating context that they call day one. And so if you walk into an Amazon office, on the wall, there's this big sign that says day one. And the point of day one is it's a reminder, and we'll talk about that later, that today is what matters. Yesterday is old news. And figuring out how we're going to innovate today to keep growing, to keep creating more value for our customers, to getting closer to our customer, to get into new adjacent spaces to our business. That's the sensibility of Amazon. So a high-performing company necessarily is an innovating company, a constantly changing company, a risk-taking company, a day one company. You know, I don't, and part of that is in today's world, I don't know an industry that isn't being challenged by non-traditional competitors, right? And this is part of that third dimension of the world where everything's commingling. You know, in the old days, everything was boxes. Like you're in the healthcare business, done. You're in the retail business, done. You're in the banking business, done. It's now all doing this. And Amazon, as an example, is doing all this. And so how do you respond to these non-traditional competitors? The only way you can respond is by being non-traditional, AKA innovating forever. That's the other thing that I think is part of this story to the CEO is this is not a one and done. You know, for the audience, Maria and Ray and the leadership team at Fintech and Americas and I have been talking about this idea that transformation may be over. Not because we don't need to transform, but because really the task is constant adaptation. You know, the word transformation implies a before and after. When in reality, the demands of today's world require constant adaptation. It will never be over. I don't care whether you're a restaurant, a retailer, or a bank. If you don't figure out how to improve the value proposition, how to use technology, people, and process to create a more profound experience for your customer, they likely aren't going to stick with you. And if they don't stick with you, ultimately you'll be out of business. So high performance innovation necessarily attached to each other.
But you were mentioning and talking about, I can hear that there is no real commitment to learning because people don't know that they have to keep learning, that they think that it's enough and then they stop there because the organization doesn't show, don't push them, don't offer, or they just do it for checking a box?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great question statement. I think you nailed it. I think the modality of most large companies historically has been training and development is a checking of the box. In fact, if you go look at the data, at least the US data, when there's a recession, the first thing that's cut in an organization is the training and development budget. Because it's like, well, it's an option. It's not required. And maybe that was sort of true in a steady state world where, you know, the shelf life of a company was like 50 years and you didn't need people to develop quickly because the pace of the business was actually pretty slow and the competition was pretty clear. But all that's over. And so, you know, the simple logic is the transformation of an organization is really about the transformation of the people. It's not about the transformation of the technology. It's about the transformation of the people. And the transformation of the people requires teaching and learning as a universal capacity of the organization embedded in the day-to-day of the organization, not treated as a separate box, not solely the responsibility of human resources, but literally everybody in the organization comes to work every day as a learner and as a teacher. And it's not hierarchical, which is the older people teach the younger people. It's everybody is teaching everybody as fast as they can to develop their individual capacities and from that, their collective capacities. Now, one funny thing about that, it's not funny, haha, is, and I don't know if we have a poll question on this, but and by the way, for the poll, please complete the poll questions if you can, and please keep asking questions. one of my favorite questions when I go into organizations, when I talk to the C-suite or the leadership team, I ask them point blank, like, what did you teach yesterday?
Mm-hmm.
Or what did you teach last week? And 99% of the time they look at me like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, how do you expect your people to be better, to be more productive, higher performing, unless they're being taught? And I think the teaching by us is far more effective than the teaching by third parties. And I'm not against, signing people up for seminars and handing them books to read. I mean, all of it matters. But I would say to you, if you really want to transform the organization, commit to teaching in the trenches, in the day-to-day. Don't just give people tasks, give them tasks and then explain to them why you're giving them tasks, how they should do the task, how you're there to support them, teach them through the context of the task.
Mm-hmm. Now, Chris, like going back to the CEO, because I know that's really a point that is stressed so much, and I've heard it many times myself, so I imagine you heard them many more. What do you say to the CEO? Okay, I put you in front of my CEO. What do you say to him?
I have to convince him that it's the right thing to do. And it's not the right thing to do for him or her. It's the right thing to do for the people who work in the company. And it's not about profit, it's about the right thing to do. That the responsibility of a leader is to ensure the sustainable health of the entity that they lead, and to ensure that the people who make up the entity, whether they're citizens or employees, are given every opportunity to realize their full potential. And in realizing their full potential, they will realize the full potential of the entity. I just described the American dream. I just described how this country was led during the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. I was all about helping the individual realize their full potential, and that's the right thing to do. That was their responsibility. And I think the same construct applies to corporations. It is the right thing to do. Humans are not cogs in our machine. They are not tools to be used. They're humans. And they are giving us a significant percentage of their life. By some calculation, as much as 65% of your working hours is spent at work. And so my view is we owe you an environment of growth, an environment of positive change, an environment of personal and professional development. And by the way, the upside to us as the corporation is, if you are happier, if you are more productive, if you are more connected, if you are more innovative, the outcome is what we want, which is more revenue, more profit, more customer retention. All the things we want as businesses are actually better achieved if we look at this work through this dimension called being human, this third dimension. So now the problem with that argument, Maria, is we're dealing with sort of a legacy notion of like, what do you mean right? Like, what's right? Like, that's not my job. My job is to run the company and make sure we deliver profit for our shareholders. Mm-hmm. So part of what I have to do, or anybody has to do, is to convince the CEO that actually the best way to deliver for the shareholders is to do the right thing. And in America, we're seeing that. The Business Roundtable, which is the organization of the largest companies in America, has come out and said the purpose of a corporation is beyond profit. The purpose of an organization is to support the community of customers, the community of employees, the community of suppliers, and help the whole realize its potential. Mm-hmm. And we believe, as the Business Roundtable, that when we do that, we will achieve the traditional financial results that we have always held up as the only reason to exist. I don't know if that.
Yeah, well, I can argue that people say that, but in reality, when you're with a CEO talking, how long do you think it takes for him to really come to admit that even something needs to be fixed? Because they know that they have an issue. They know that the technology is not getting implemented. So they are having like really proof that the changes need to be made.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I sort of go back to my comment earlier about it takes unique leadership, because it's this is like a funny thing to say. I think it takes somebody looking in the mirror and asking themselves the question, are we creating enough value for everybody? Not just for the customer, for the people that are the creators of the value for the customer. Are we creating enough value? And I think you should ask that question personally, or for the people in your life. Like, are we creating enough value for each other? Are we helping each other? You know, that we're all only given one life, I think, depending on your religion, I suppose, but I think we only get one. And so I think a CEO looking in the mirror going, am I creating enough value for all the stakeholders I serve? And if the answer is maybe not, I think that CEO is going to be willing to look at how the organization does what it does, the behaviors that it exhibits, and be willing to really start changing things. Beginning with, how are we going to measure ourselves? How do we measure value? How do we measure progress? If we're going to transform ourselves, what's the measure both of the outcome of that and the journey along the way? And you know, that's probably the first step of, like, let's agree on the destination we have in mind and how dimensional that destination is, and how we, you know, like one of the things I've talked about is really overhauling the corporate dashboard and including things like leadership behaviors, including things like risk, measuring risk. Like how good are we at taking risk? Including things like how safe do our employees feel? How safe do they feel? And what I mean by that is, do they come to work every day feeling, not thinking, that it's okay to have ideas, that it's okay to disagree, that it's okay to go talk to the CEO? Yeah. You know, and I think that is one of the poll questions that we'd love to hear from people on, like, how safe is your organization? For you or for somebody that works for you? And the safety thing, I think, is a good example of the old surface model was designed to perpetuate the divide between the leadership and everybody else. Like hierarchy, you know, hierarchy is a surface construct, a pyramid. Been around since the beginning of time. Every convening group of humans has organized as a pyramid because it's simple. Maria, you're in charge and I work for you, so you tell me what to do. You know, Ray works for me. I tell Ray what to do. And on we go. But in the world we now live in, that model, that hierarchical model where people are afraid to speak to the person above them, to tell the truth to the person above them, to challenge the person above them. I don't think it works. because to transform, we need everybody to help. To do things differently, we need ideas from everywhere. And so if you have an unsafe work environment where people are afraid to express their truth, I just don't know how you get to that high performing place.
Well, it's intimidating, Chris, let's face it. When you go to the CEO office, it's kind of like just when you go in there, it's a completely different experience, and you better be, prepared and alert. But here, we got some results of the polls, and in the group that we have here, is it safe to express your opinion? 89% says yes.
Wow.
So that's amazing. I wonder if this is just with the CEO, with their bosses. And does your management team teach employees how to transform? 44% said yes, and 56% says no.
But I would say both of those are really positive numbers. I mean, my experience is far less than that. That may be U.S. biased. But to the point of I get asked a lot, how do you create a safe environment? If your current environment is not exactly safe, and as all things, it's complicated. First thing I would do, for those that are interested, is read about Google's Project Aristotle, which was an internal research effort Google conducted several years ago to figure out what enabled high-performing teams. And what they figured out is the high-performing teams had a sense of psychological safety. My point is, in reading about Project Aristotle, you will also get insights on how to begin to think about creating a safer environment. My simple answer to the question, to a very complicated question, is the leadership letting go of their ego. Letting go of their ego. And specifically showing vulnerability. Showing that they don't know. Which is counter, we're raised to believe that when you become a SVP or you become an executive, your job is to never show doubt, never show that you don't have the answer. That's how we're, at least in America, that's how we're wired. No, when you get to that level, never show fear, never show doubt, never show worry, never show vulnerability. And I think the problem with that is it sends a signal that that doesn't support safety. It sends a signal of separation, not togetherness. It sends a signal of, in a way, being inhuman, because no human is perfect. No human has all the answers. And so I think it's particularly hard for, call it, people that have been in leadership positions for a long time, who grew up with hierarchy, grew up with, well, I'm supposed to always have the answer. This transition is really, really hard, but it's also really, really critical. Mm-hmm. And there's a quick story that goes with this. There's a book written 3 or 4 years ago, I think called Rebel Ideas, by this guy, Matthew Syed. And it's all about innovation and risk-taking. And he gets into this topic of safety, psychological safety, and he talks about an ascent attempt of Mount Everest back in 1996, a group of 7 guys led by a very experienced guy. And the point is, in the ascent, the lead guy made the wrong decision, and nobody on the team, everybody else on the team believed it was the wrong decision, but none of them had the courage to tell the guy it was the wrong decision, and they all died. And my point is, I think most environments are psychologically unsafe. Most team dynamics are not purely psychologically safe. There's a deference, there's a hierarchy. You're not allowed to say that to Maria. You're not allowed to say that, and that, as you might imagine, that profoundly impacts innovation. It profoundly impacts the ability of an organization to change if half the things aren't being said because of fear that they won't be well received, fear of rejection, like it's just fear of consequence.
Mm-hmm. Chris, we have an amazing question by Richard Martinez. And
we should ask the earlier question.
Yes, I know, but this is his second question, and he's right on point, because he says, there must be a single view of what a value is. Many organizations don't have a standard of value measuring. The CEO sees it as a shareholder benefit. The CX team sees it as a customer satisfaction. Sales team as an increased product sold. So the quintessential thing is the defined value in a sense that unites all areas to work towards the same goal.
I don't know if there's a question there, but I will have a comment. Well said, Richard. So part of the work that I do outside of my role at Fintech America is I'm examining the state of the world. And I'm trying to figure out how to reset the trajectory of humanity to result in a better outcome for more people. And I believe that part of the problem we have, and there's parallels with corporations, is we have unleashed technology without a real understanding of what it will do to humanity. Technology has no governor, no guide, no rules. We just unleash it through the lens of commercialization primarily. And it's created amazing productivity, but also created some pretty complicated problems. One of my beliefs to reset the trajectory of the world is we have to start with resetting the definition of progress. Over the last 100 years, the definition of progress has been primarily economic, specifically gross domestic product, nationally or globally. But we know that economic only measures, just like in a corporation, kind of miss some really important facets of this, And so my argument for society, for the planet, is well-being. And I did not create this idea. It's been talked about going back to the days of President Kennedy, talking about the flaw of GDP as a measure and talking about societal well-being as a better measure, which, by the way, includes economic progress. If I was going to try to create a singular value for everybody to rally around within a corporation, the sort of tip of the pyramid of the dashboard, it would be well-being. It would be the well-being of our customers and how well our service or product enables them, enables their life, enables their happiness, enables their accomplishment. Mm-hmm. It would be well-being of our employees, and kind of the same thing: well-being economically, well-being mentally, well-being spiritually, well-being emotionally. Again, people deserve lives where they can realize their full potential, and they can realize a state of satisfaction, of achievement, a connection to others, purpose, and I'd apply it to I'd apply it to vendors, partners, and I think well-being is a multidimensional thing. It's not measured simply by, well, I took my temperature and I'm 98.6. It's got many facets, but I think conceptually that would be my singular, to answer Richard's point, that would be my singular measure.
We got the survey on a 1 to 10 scale. How open is your organization? That's exactly what we're talking. And it's funny because we have 1 to 11%. So but then in the 5, 6, 56%, only 11% give it to a 9, 10. So we have 11, 56, in the middle. So not amazing, not that bad. And then 11 on the other end. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's maybe not a surprise. Again, my whole thing about boxes are safe. The beauty of boxes is you have walls, you have a floor, you have a ceiling. It's safe. It's like a little cave that you can hide in. And so corporations and even countries have just stacked up the boxes. But the problem with boxes is they're not open. They're closed. They're boxes. and so part of what this transformation task is blowing up the boxes. And that's uncomfortable as hell. It's, I mean, here's an irony, right? Like most organizations aren't psychologically safe. And yet most organizations are made up of boxes, which are all about safety. But it's safety in a very micro, within like very kind of, micro, I think, form. Like I'm in accounting and I'm in my little box in accounting and I don't really understand sales and I don't really understand marketing and I don't ever talk to those people, but I'm in my box and it's safe and I get my paycheck every couple of weeks and I really don't like my job, but it's safe. And I think we just need to blow it all up and we need to think of organizations as like the human body. The human body is not boxes. The human body is like the perfect integrated system. There's nothing that happens in the human body that doesn't impact all the other parts of the human body, right? Like that's how it works. But we've, over time, turned corporations into the opposite of the human body. And there's no linkage. There's no sort of lateral thinking. There's no recognition that sales is really connected to product, which is connected to finance, which is connected to HR. Everybody's sort of operating in these weird little safe boxes, and ultimately they're closed.
To Richard, what he was commenting about everybody having a different point of view or checking up their department. And also here we got the result of how shared is the strategic plan. And then we are like, again, 5, 6, like 22% is in the middle, 33%. Okay. 22, 3, 4. So.
Wait, say those again, Maria.
Like
most are in the middle.
Yes, most in the middle are like 22%. 33% says that between a 7 and 8. So okay, they practically share the strategic plan. What you want that if it's like is their strategic plan, is the whole strategic plan for the bank is one, is many, because then you end up with the silos. I know what my department does, but I don't know what's the overall plan for the bank.
Yeah. So here's again, like another letter to the CEO that I wrote was about this topic of the importance of one plan, and we've done this at Fintech America, so you understand this very well. So the idea is, tomorrow we show up at work and we say, we have a whole new set of metrics for our organization, and we're going after well-being, and underneath that are a bunch of other metrics, including our traditional financial metrics. But the whole point here is we want to transform this bank, transform this business to create more value for all the people we serve. And we're going to call that well-being. Now, well-being has many dimensions, and it's going to require changing a lot of what we do and how we do it. It's going to require product development. It's going to require new organizational structures. It's going to require new management practices. It's going to require every function in the organization to participate in transforming the organization to realize this outcome called well-being.
Mm-hmm.
And we want everybody in the organization to participate, and I mean everybody, to participate in the development of our plan. Yeah, go ahead.
Monica here, Monica Tamacas says, I think people perceive how open their organizations are depending on their leaders. That is why having the right leadership is so important.
Well said, Monica. And I'll just be brutal here. So imagine an organization, CEO is open, all the C-suite executives are open, and then you got a bunch of people reporting to them.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say there's 7 people at the top, and then you got like another 50 people below them. Within the 50, let's say 20 of them are closed. 20 of them don't buy the transformation thing, don't buy the dimensionalization thing, don't buy the well-being thing, don't buy anything that I've said or you've said. You got to get rid of them. Or, well, first you have to develop them, you have to teach them, you have to try to pull them out of their closed state into a more open state. But my point is, if you have large pockets of people within the day-to-day of the organization that are anti-open, anti-transformation, high performance, anti-change,
Mm-hmm.
this ain't happening. And so this is why, I hate to say it, but organizations like Amazon and Bezos, these leaders that are almost brutal about the importance of change, the importance, the sort of day one mentality. If there's any equivocation, I'm just not sure how you get much traction.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to make it a universal proposition. It can't be, you've got naysayers all over the place saying, I don't buy it, I don't believe it. You're just not going to get to the destination that you're after. You've got to have that alignment. But the one plan thing, if we can get everybody involved and work hard to articulate why well-being is the outcome we're after, how people would individually benefit, why this serves our stakeholders better, and be open to contribution at every level of the organization in terms of what we should do, I think that can move a lot of the people who are hesitant, who are less open to the journey.
But Chris, am I hearing that then any organization is hopeless if the top down doesn't instruct or doesn't have that vision? Because you may have certain that are very, like to the traditional ways of doing things, and how much the people bottom up can push in order to make the changes happen. Of course, it's much easier when you have an organization, a CEO that is much more innovative and knows, at least has the vision that something needs to be done. Maybe doesn't know exactly what needs to be done, but knows that something has to change.
Yeah, it's funny. So I'm reminded of when I spoke at that conference in Miami, Panama, back in whenever it was April or May. Somebody asked me that specific question, and what they could do, like how could they motivate their leadership team to really begin to think differently. And my answer is knowledge, that content, building, sharing articles, sharing cases, and it's not a quick fix to the problem, but beginning to, there's a term, beginning to socialize in the organization how other banks are transforming, or how other businesses are transforming, or how other non-traditional competitors are moving into the space, not through the lens of threat, but just through the lens of like, FYI,
Mm-hmm.
this is happening.
Mm-hmm.
And part of what banks, I think, struggle with, which I think is true of a lot of other companies, is their box. And they're not very good at monitoring what is going on outside of their box. And they're not necessarily seeing how new competitors are coming into the space, how direct competitors are changing what they're doing, and so I would suggest to people that are wanting to convince their leadership to begin to think differently is just start sharing what's going on in the world.
Well, I want to believe that, one of the most important mission of FinTech Americas is really bringing that knowledge, make it more public, like democratization of what is going on. So then other banks can learn by example and, just move in the right direction. And for the senior level and for the C level or for the HRs that are looking at that, they can see, okay, and use it as an example to support their case. So I have another question by Ivan Urgel. It says, very good concepts, excellent ideas. However, this is centered in big corporations. What happens with the medium and small companies, the pymes, that represent also 80% of the market and employ millions of people?
I think everything I said applies whether you're 10 people or 10 million people. It applies to countries, it applies to companies, it applies to families. It's all the same shit. like we have to do this. Like there's no business that I think is exempt from the need to change. And you go, well, what about a bodega? Like a bodega on the corner in New York. Like they don't need to change anything. I'm like, are you kidding me? With delivery services now, like if they don't change their products, like they got to evolve what they're selling, because it's quite possible that a lot of what they sell is now delivered by somebody else.
Correct.
I don't think any entity is exempt from this task, or these concepts are irrelevant. It's all the same stuff. Like
the funny thing is that we're not talking about money, Ivan, and maybe I don't know if that responds to your question, but it's not about money. We're not talking about a big investment. It's about behaviors. That is the most difficult thing to do, but it's not like, okay, big corporations can invest a lot of money because this is not technology. What we're saying is changing the behaviors of people.
And I'll be weird. It applies to marriage. All of this applies to marriage, which is, we can hold on and believe that the steady state of the marriage is going to somehow survive. But my view is, not in all cases, but in many cases, if we don't evolve us, if we don't learn how to modify our behaviors, if we don't get better at listening to each other, if we don't seek to grow ourselves, I think what happens is we get bored. And then we start thinking, well, maybe there's another option out there. So I think whatever the entity is, whether it's a marriage, a country, a company, this change mandate, this transformation mandate, which is really an adaptation mandate, I think is a mandate. It's not, yes, entities will survive without having to do this. But I'd say, generally speaking, if you care about your well-being, the well-being of others, the well-being of your significant other, whatever, then I think you've got to embrace this transformation task.
We have another question from Jose. It's more a reflection. For change to exist in organizations, it is of the utmost importance that leaders believe that all positive change will bring not only monetary rewards, but also an improvement in the sense of belonging in the company, in all areas of the body, mind, and soul, and align for a goal. Is that correct? That's what he asked.
That's Jose. That's spot on. It requires a unique leadership that understands that the responsibility is greater than profit. That the responsibility is a human responsibility, both a human for our customers, for our employees, for our partners. I mean, this is my big frustration I have many frustrations in the world today, but I don't think we're very good at acknowledging our human. In America, we suffer from both gross partisanship and ridiculous anonymity.
Mm-hmm.
I live in Boston, and if you walk down the street and you say hello to somebody, they think you're trying to rob them. Like what? We have a responsibility to each other. Whether you're an employee, a lover, a stranger on the street, we have a responsibility to dimensionalize how we are doing this together to create more value that results in greater satisfaction, greater fulfillment, and more people getting to the end of the curve and going, you know what, that was amazing.
Mm-hmm. So before, Chris, you respond me, if you would be willing to speak to my CEO, I would tell you why I think I need you to speak to my CEO. And my first impression is that because sometimes you say the same to the CEO, but then still it gets more strength if it comes from someone from outside. And that's why it's like a validation. And then sometimes you say, because I've been there, done that, and you said, but I said that, and but however, no action was taken. However, a consultancy firm or someone came and said that to the CEO, and all of a sudden it makes sense. So
yeah. I mean, I you're right, and I think that's another box. That's another legacy approach, and it's a box method, which is like, Chris, I appreciate what you're saying, but you're in the box of, marketing manager. So you're in that box. But this other guy, ran Harvard, whatever, I'm going to listen more to that box. And I think it's a sad truth. It's a sad truth that we probably all do. And even over time, like the Harvard guy, when you first meet him, you're really listening to him. And then 2 years later, you've put him in a box.
Okay, but at least we have a couple of years until that happens. We want to hope. So there is only hope, and then we can go into some other box.
I think that's I think a good way to wrap this is CEO, you do not run a box, and the people that work for you are not boxes. And if you want to realize the responsibility that you have to create well-being for more people, get rid of all the boxes in your head, the boxes in the people, the boxes in the departments, because they may appear to be safe, but they actually are the riskiest thing you have going on in your company. A quick story. I did a strategy work with a big regional bank in the U.S. and with the 7 top guys. They were all guys. That was a problem. No women. And the head of retail and the head of commercial had never actually had a one-on-one conversation in 10 years of working together. That's box.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh man, that's nuts. Anyway.
So we are getting to the end of our program. I don't see any more questions. Thank you very much, Chris, of course, for this candid conversation, open. Thank you very much for the community that participate. This space is for you, and to be more open and to share ideas because we are all in the same wagon and trying to see how to do it better and how to improve how we do things. So.
Yeah, and if I can just tag on to that really quickly, the purpose, Santi Zakowicz is our chief marketing officer, and I talk a bit about purpose. And the purpose of Fintech America is, yes, we need to make money, but it's really to help the financial industry in Latin America help more people. I mean, the financial industry, using the human anatomy as the analogy, is the oxygen in the blood that enables enables civilization to operate. And so we have a bit of an altruistic desire of just helping you guys transform your businesses, and in doing so, be able to help more, more customers that you serve, more people that you serve. And so if we can be of help to you, if you want to talk to me about any of this stuff directly, my email is chris@fintechamericas.co. I am happy to help you, and Maria is happy to help you. So
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining.
Write to us. I know that there is one question that we were not able to answer, but we can just, we will respond, Jose. Thank you for all your comments. Please be on the lookout. We are keeping, our programming, as you know, every week. So of topics that we believe they are of interest to you. So be in contact with us. And of course, we wait for you in November. We're going to have an amazing thing when we have our all digital conference, and the community gathers. So a pleasure being with you. And thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.